usually not up here this early, but I'm glad to be with you um, this year. The assignment that Leah gave me is actually a very challenging one, because it's easy to talk about medicine and diseases, but she gave me a topic: trust in God. How do we rest in faith? And she told me to make it medical. So we're going to try to do that. I sort of added a subtitle: Thy faith hath made thee whole. All right, let's start off with some facts. 9 out of 10 individuals in this country die prematurely. That's a fact, all right? 9 out of 10 die prematurely. So we want to address the question, why? All right? We spend more money per capita, health-wise, than anyone in the world. And yet our death rates are much higher than most countries in the world. Why? In unpacking this dilemma, I go to Dr. C. Everett Koop. He was the Surgeon General under Ronald Reagan. And he was really the originator of this statement. And we now have plenty evidence, i.e. research, studies to show what we're really dying of. So we know the problem, all right? But the question is still, why? We know the what, but do we know the why? He suggested that the why was lifestyle. Lifestyle. See, and the reality is we know that the foods that we're eating are killing us, and yet we're still eating them. And not only we're eating them, we're saying, I just love them. One of my patients in D.C. became the president of the D.C. Baptist Pastors Association. And he told me, he said, Doc, when I become president, I'm going to have you in to talk with the pastors. They need to know what you know. And so he had me in for 1 week. Now, it's a big deal to go and speak to these pastors. We're talking about representing thousands of individuals all across D.C. And so people really line up trying to get in there. Well, I didn't ask to get in. He brought me in. But he didn't bring me once, 2, 3, 8 times in a row. I went and spoke to those pastors. The last time, I said, either I'm lying or y'all crazy. I said, because you're still eating the same way that you were eating 8 weeks ago. There's something wrong. And you talk about, I just love it. How can you love something that you know is killing you? On my radio program about 3 weeks ago, I did a show entitled Insanity. And I basically said that we're crazy. That we're crazy. That if we actually told somebody what we're doing, they would call you crazy. Or if somebody told you they were doing what you're doing, you'd call them crazy. Because it doesn't make sense, does it? But yet we're doing it anyway. See, we know. Harvard study looking at prostate cancer, all right? They said if you eat less than 1 egg a day, that you would double your risk of prostate cancer, all right? If you eat less than 1 serving of turkey or chicken, you would quadruple your risk of the prostate cancer progression. And what they did, they looked at patients who had prostate cancer. And they noted that if they ate the eggs or the chicken, turkey, that progression was defined as the cancer coming back, the cancer spreading to the bones, or death. That's how they define progression. Eggs, chicken, turkey, progression. Well, the Adventist Health Study also looked at, I cut it off for me, please. I turned it down all the way, but it don't want to act right. The Adventist Health Study looked at colon cancer, all right? And what they do in these studies, they look at a specific entity, so we can try to define as much as possible. But the principles apply to most cancers. They found that both red and white meat increase the risk of colon cancer. Twice the risk for those who ate red meat. And 3 times the risk for those eating chicken and fish, those white meats. You understand? Now we thought that, those meats were good for you. The chicken and fish. I did a study, I did a program, my radio show, some point last year on fish and then on chicken. It blew my mind. All right? I knew it was bad, but I didn't know it was that bad. And this is research. I'm sorry. This is not my opinion. This is what the literature is saying. It says that there's nothing more polluted than salmon other than the city dump. All right? Then when I did the program on chicken, I said, I'm gonna have to slip out the back door because y'all gonna be after me. They said all commercial chicken was polluted with fecal matter, not streak, clumps of fecal matter. All right? And one group actually sued this processing company to slow the belt down so that the inspectors could inspect the chickens for contamination. The judge threw the case out. He said, how can you expect these folk to lose the money by slowing the belt down to make sure that the chicken don't have feces on them? How can you do that? How can you expect that? Are you crazy? But guess what? Y'all going and paying that extra money for the free-range chickens? 85% of them were shown to also be contaminated. Why? They're processed on the same belt. I'm sorry. But, you know, I actually hate to say this because people think I'm picking it. But I feel if I know it and don't say it, you know, which is worse? You know, so I have to say it. I used to eat fish periodically. You know, when I go to a wedding and they have it at a hotel and the vegetables would be so pitiful. So I'd eat fish. But then one day it hit me. I saw this special on television, and they had this waste, and it was so toxic that no one would take it. They literally took it from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast, and no one would let them dump it in their landfill. So what did they do? They took it out in the middle of the ocean, and they dumped it in the ocean. I said, wait a minute. That's where the fish is coming from. And so I stopped eating fish even on rare occasions. We go to this restaurant. I don't like restaurants so much, but my wife does. So I take my wife out to this restaurant that has a lot of vegan meals on the menu. And she said, baby, you going to eat fish? I said, baby, I told you I'm not eating any more fish. Well, I'm not going to eat any either. But when the waitress comes, she said, where do you get your salmon? Oh, we get it from the fresh waters of Alaska. You know? Right answer, right? But my lawyer wife goes to the restroom. And as she comes back, she sees the manager. She asked the manager, where do you get your salmon? Well, the woman just told you where we get the salmon. He said, we get them from the fresh waters of Alaska as babies. And then we bring them back and we let them grow. That's called what? Farm fish. You know? And when I did the session on Fish on the Radio, I had this nutritionist with me, and she said, you know, what they do is the fish look so pitiful. Right before they take them to market, they put these red pellets in the water. So the fish eat the pellets, and they get all nice and rosy and look healthy, and you pay your money, and you just got snookered. All right, so we know this. But guess what else we know? We know about cardiogenic dementia now. All right? Cardiogenic dementia. And what, you see this connection between the brain and the heart. We know that the same factors causing heart attacks now are causing brain attacks or dementia. You know, we used to talk about it was lead or it was aluminum. It's fat, y'all. It's fat. What they've done, and I don't know if you can see in the background, there's a nice piece of beef, you know, because that's what's causing the dementia. They did studies and they looked at a cross-section of the vessels in these people's brains at autopsies that had dementia. And they're just clogged up, all right? Plaque in the brain, just like plaques in the heart, all right? So if you do things to prevent the plaques in the brain, in the heart, the same kind of thing would prevent plaques in the brain. And so this cardiogenic dementia, we know about that, all right? It's been written about. It's in the books, y'all. They talk about it all the time. So why aren't we changing? We know these things are killing us. We know that what we're doing is killing us. Why aren't we changing? Why would an individual die if they don't really have to die? This is the question that I've asked myself because it doesn't make sense to me. You know, that's you know, but this is the answer, I believe. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. What we're doing doesn't make sense unless you step back and you start understanding that there's a power that's unseen, that's impacting what you do. You know, we need more faith. And he said unto her, daughter, thy faith hath made thee whole. Go in peace and be whole of the plague. We need faith. We need trust. We need to believe in God. So how do we get it? All right? One of the principles that I have is that you have to trust when you can't trace. You got to trust when you can't trace. I call that faith. That's my definition of faith. You know, it's easy to trust if you can see it. If you can, you know, I used to say I needed a God that could see around corners. You know, can see what I can't see, when I can't trace it. But you know what? The devil is so slick. I now realize that I just need somebody who can see, period. Because what you're looking at, you think is real, is not real. It's Memorex. You know, my wife called me the other day. She said she got in the car and turned the car on, and her phone said, the lake is so many minutes away. So she called me and said, how did my phone know I was going to the lake? I said, baby, it's called artificial intelligence. That's your pattern. Every day you get up in the morning and you go to the lake and walk. So your phone knows your pattern. So Sabbath, she called me. She said, you know, I got in the car and I cut my car on, and the phone said the church is so many minutes away. I said, baby, that's called artificial intelligence. All right? And it's real. But it's Memorex. You know? I was looking. I just bought a new phone. That's why I can't even cut it off. Artificial intelligence. You think it's off, but it ain't off. But I, you know, there was something on there, so I went and looked, what is this they're talking about? They had literally 8,000 scientists working on this thing of artificial intelligence. All right? You don't understand what you're looking at. You think you're looking at somebody. You think you're talking to somebody, but you're not really talking to that person. You know? The devil is as a roaring lion, but he's doing it not as a lion. All right? Because you would react to the lion, but you don't react to artificial intelligence. And so you have to learn to use something different. I call that something God. Now, we're talking about spirituality and medicine. And you must understand, for the first 15 years of my practice, I would not talk about spirituality in my practice. I was the head elder of my church, and I wouldn't talk about spirituality in my practice because I didn't want to impose my views on my patients. Then one day the Lord smacked me and told me that I'm the best thing you got going for you. You know? Now, it's interesting because he was allowing me to get these patients well, even though I wasn't mentioning his name. God is awesome, you know? But what he told me was that, look at your patients. They're spiritual minded. 95% of them. All right? They may not always all be Christians, but they're spiritual. And see, some of y'all got y'all little nose up at these Muslims. Y'all better put them down. I got some Muslim patients. I got to get out the office now because I got to go pray. I had one, so can I use your other room? It's time for me to pray. And he goes in there and he puts his thing on the floor and he prays. And these people are outstanding people. You know, we did a thing in our church year before last, I guess it was now, where we looked at the relationship between Christianity and the Muslim religion. Of the 27 prophets in the Muslim religion, 25 of them are in the Bible. So when God was speaking to me, he let me know that I am God. I am the one that heals. And if your patients are really going to get well, you need to introduce them to me. All right? He told me that there are people that will not see me but through somebody like you. You understand? You know, I'm doing a 30 days to wellness at one of the churches in the D.C. area now. And it's amazing. They were talking Sunday that I asked any questions. He said, Dr. Watkins, does your taste buds change on this program? I said, what do you mean? He said, I tried to eat some potato chips. Chips that I love. And I couldn't eat the bag because it was so salty. My taste buds have changed. All right? I just laugh. But I'm doing this 30 days to wellness. And it's an internal and external ministry approach. First, I'm working with just the church members. We're always going out and trying to evangelize others when we haven't evangelized ourselves. And so it's just the church members. And the pastor was there, and his wife was there, and the members of the church, and they're following the principles that God has ordained. And they're getting better. And then they're going to invite their friends, their family, their co-workers to the church for the next session. Because there are people who will not see God if it were not for the health message. He called it the what? Right hand of the gospel. So as you are making the changes that you're making, it's making a difference. And so this whole area of spirituality, and if you can see the top of this slide, it says faith, spirituality, and medicine. People are understanding the importance of combining these as we look at how to get people well. There's a principle we need to understand. Before there was evidence, and we call evidence what? That research, all right? Before there was evidence, there was, I spelled that wrong, I'm sorry. 4 o'clock in the morning. There was divine guidance, all right? There was divine guidance. See, my wife is that while I'm back here struggling, working, she's on Martha's Vineyard, relaxing, you know. She said she would have been here, but she had to go to Martha's Vineyard. She always reads my slides over, so this doesn't happen. But before there was evidence, there was divine guidance, all right? Look at this. Before God created man, as I was meditating on this thing, this thought hit me. Before God created man, he designed a diet for that man. All right? A diet that we won't eat. You know? Does God really knows what's best for us? You know? We act like he doesn't know because we reject what he tells us to do. And see, this is not the world. This is the church. We reject what God... Have you been to a potluck at church lately? Some of the most unhealthy food on the planet. You know? And you don't have to have meat to be unhealthy. You know? I remember when I think it was 1992. It stands out in my brain. I learned that 60 to 90% of all the calories in cheese came from fat. Oh, Lord, not my Lito's pizza. Have you ever had Lito's pizza? Oh, boy. You're talking about something. But God said, you can't eat that stuff. That stuff will kill you. All right? You know? But that's what we serve at church. And so it's not just the world rejecting God's plan. It's the church rejecting it also. We need some faith. All right? The Bible says now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not yet seen. So, faith is the substance. That's a thing you can feel, you know, substance. It has body. It's the evidence. That's something you can actually see. So we need to be able to see and feel when you can't see it and feel it. That's called faith. The substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. You know, we can actually stop dying prematurely. But in order to do that, we must decide that we will change. And that we'll start allowing God to be God in our lives. It's not that we don't know. It's that we've chosen not to do. All right? And this has really bothered me. I've looked at this thing, the importance of words, the importance of understanding our exposure as little children, and how behavior and different things impact us. And all these things are relevant, all right? They're all relevant to what we do, to how we think, how we feel. But in reality, what you need to know is that you are able to change, all right? That in spite of your background, all of us remember the projects. Well, not all, but some of us remember the projects, all right? And we remember that God brought us through those projects and out of those projects. When I started my practice, I set up an office in the projects in Washington, D.C. And the folk in the projects thought, well, if he's here at the projects, that means he's not good. He can't practice anywhere else. I said, don't put yourself down. I said, I chose you over 19th and L. That's the high rent district. All right? I said, I came here because that's where I came from. It was in a different city, but it was the same projects and the same mentality. And people in the projects need good health too. All right? And so I went back to the projects. All right? So God can take people, regardless of your background. What he needs is just your willingness to change. And what you need is some faith and some trust in God. You need to be able to trust when you can't trace. All right? When God says, do this way, even though you don't understand it, you're willing to do it. Why? Because you develop a relationship with God that will carry you through the various aspects of your life. You can trust him. I learned when I was in school, the only fear we have for the future is we forget where God has led us in the past. We have history. And if you forget your history, you're likely to what? Repeat it. You see? And so we have all these difficulties. We're dying. And all of these diseases can be prevented and reversed. Last week on my radio show, I did a show on diabetes. And I was mad. All right? I was mad because one of my patients had come to me the week before, and she'd gone to the endocrinologist, and the endocrinologist said to her, honey, it's okay if your hemoglobin A1C is 8. I said, what? I said, what's her number? I said, that's ridiculous for somebody to say that. The normal hemoglobin A1C is 4.8 to 5.6. That's the normal. And you need to know that. All right? I do hemoglobin A1Cs on all of my patients, regardless of how much they weigh. If they're 30 years old or older, I'm doing a hemoglobin A1C. Because diabetes is is epidemic in our community. And why is that important? Because it's the number one cause of blindness. It's the number one cause of amputations. It's the number one cause of kidney failure. And what they found is that you don't have to be a diabetic in order for that to start. It actually starts in the pre-diabetic phase. That's between 5.7 and 6.4. So this lady is told that if your hemoglobin A1C is 8, you're okay. That's like saying, honey, it's all right for you to go blind. It's all right for your kidneys to fail, for you to have a heart attack and stroke because of diabetes. It's no problem. Just take your pills. But let me tell you about those diabetic pills. There was a study done, and it looked at the relationship between diabetic control and mortality. And they looked at whether you took 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 different kinds of diabetic medicines, with or without insulin, your control, and your mortality rate. And what did they find? That by taking those pills, you actually increase your chance of dying. The mortality rate increased even if your sugar was under control. I said, what? I didn't even know that. All right? The author said that you'll just be buried in a smaller casket. But they also looked at diet. And they found that if you change your diet, decrease those calories in your diet, and got your sugar under control, you still died at a higher rate. So it didn't matter if it was pills or diet, unless, according to the Adventist II study, unless it was a plant-based diet. Did you hear me? If it's a plant-based diet and you get your sugar under control, you decrease the mortality rate. You decrease the blindness, the kidney failure, the amputation. With the other diet, even though the calories were down, you lose the weight, the blindness, the amputation stayed up. But you did get a decrease in kidney failure, praise the Lord. So you got some benefit. But you're not getting the benefit that you thought you were getting. And as many, quote, informed physicians thought you were getting. But when we actually look at the evidence says that God knew what he was doing when he gave us a diet. So long before the research was out, God said, you eat this way and you'll live. You eat man's way and you're going to die prematurely. Even though that man is in a really plush office, all the latest instruments, he still doesn't know what I know. And if you're going to be successful, you must have faith in me. I heard something at camp meeting this year that really was amazing. Dr. Gina Brown was talking on education night. And she said that prestigious schools are now looking at our model of having multiple grades in one room. Because they're determining that those children who, when I grew up, it was first and second grade, third and fourth grade, in one room with one teacher. First and second, third and fourth, and then there's fifth and sixth, seventh and eighth, in one room with one teacher. All right? But what they're finding, and we did that because we didn't have a lot of money to buy, build bigger buildings and hire more teachers. But God said that we should have an educational program. And so we did it. It was the same way at Pine Forge. I've talked to Lester. I've talked to Wendell Cheatham. They had multiple grades also when they came up. But now the world recognizes that that method actually produces smarter kids. Because repetition is the essence of learning. And while you're in that first grade, you're hearing that stuff twice. You hear it in the first grade, you hear it again in the second grade. In the third grade, in the fourth grade, the same thing is happening. And actually, because there was a first and second on this side of the room, and third and fourth on this side of the room, you're actually hearing it 4 times. So you can't help but be smart. God has a plan. We have to learn to trust God when we can't trace him. And because we don't trust him, we're dying like flies. We're dying of diseases that are preventable. And we're dying of diseases that are reversible. Ms. P said that we brought people almost back from the grave. The reality is that's the truth. When I first left surgery, went to alternative medicine, the only people that came to me were people who had one foot in the grave and the other foot up, heading toward the grave. Why else would they go to an alternative doctor? You understand? And I laugh about it now because I used to say, I got to get some of them people well. Otherwise, the word would get out, don't go to Watkins. Because if you go to Watkins, you're going to die. Now, they're almost dead when they got there. But we don't think about that. What we think about, he went to Watkins. And he died. I was in Danville, Virginia last year. And I like to, when I do weekend seminars, I like to do a men's only. Now, you women, y'all got on me. Well, you got to do one for us too. Well, I did a men's only because men don't tend to go. Look at the number of men here. You men you should be congratulated. But normally men don't seek information. But I learned in another project that I did when I started. I did a project for seniors in Washington, D.C. called Walk for Life. And the men didn't come. I worked with old, poor, uneducated black folks living in high-rise buildings, And I wanted to see if one applied the Adventist health message in a research package, if it would make a difference. And it did. But the men wasn't coming, so I had a men's only. The room was packed. So I started doing this men's only group. So I was doing this in Danville, and I'm in the middle of it, and I see this guy in the front row. I hadn't really paid any attention. I said, huh. I stopped the session and grabbed him. Because when he came to me, he had HIV. He had a fungal infection in his spinal canal with temp fevers of 104 and 105 every day, But I used God's methods. It's been over 20 years. He's looking so good, you know? And I went there because the guy, one of my patients, who's a non-Adventist, right, said, I want you to come to Danville, and I'm going to have you speak in the Adventist church. Because they need this message too. But he had bad heart disease. He called me from CCU, Coronary Care Unit, and he said the doctors had told him that if he didn't have open heart surgery, he would not leave the hospital alive. I'm not a cardiologist, but I know medicine. So I asked him a few questions, and I said, well, I don't think that they can actually say that. All right? Yes, you are sick, and yes, you need some intervention. But you don't have to have surgery. I said, I'll call my boy, Cardboy Edison in Cleveland, and I'll arrange for you to go to Cleveland and see Dr. Edison. He said, well, what does Dr. Edison know that you don't know? I said, nothing. I said, but I'm trying to give you some options. You don't have to come to me, you know. He said, no, I'm coming to you. I said, well, look here, I'm telling you, if you come to me, I'm going to whip you behind. All right? So get prepared to work. And he came. And I saw him every day but Sabbath. And I worked him and worked him and worked him and reversed his heart disease. So he wanted me to come to Danville and help his friends in Danville. It's like God's methods work. But we don't trust God. You see? We don't trust God. And the reason we don't trust him is that we really don't have a relationship with him. Don't go there, Doc. Let me just tell you. I told God one day, I don't feel your presence in my life. And I want to feel your presence. He said, you will find me when you search for me with all your heart. I said, wait a minute now. Are you suggesting that I don't have a relationship? Yes. You ain't giving it all up. You're holding. There's a big Chester drawer. And you gave him everything except one little drawer. Lord, you don't know my wife. You don't know my children. My boss is special. Only I can handle that. I can't give that over to you. And because we refuse to give over to God in those things, why would we give over to God in matters of life and death when it comes to our health? Why would we trust God with our health if we don't trust him with our children? All right? With our bosses. I had one patient, a little short young lady that worked at the Department of Education. And she was complaining about her boss all the time. I said, honey, when your boss act a fool, just laugh. You know, she already think you crazy. So just laugh. Don't let it upset you. Because stress is the #1 cause of death in this country. So just laugh. I said, she cannot fire you unless God wants you fired. And if he wants you out there, that means he has a better plan for you. All right? If you don't believe that, stop going to church. Stop wasting your money. Wasting your time. So I didn't see her for about 2 years. She comes back. She said, Dr. Watkins, I didn't get another doctor. But you remember my boss? I said, how could I forget? You talked about her all the time. Well, she got fired. She said, I didn't lift a hand. The other folk got her. And I got a promotion. And I've been going around to black colleges and universities. and teaching them how to get money from the Department of Education. She graduated from Alabama A&M, a black school. You understand? It's like if you learn to trust God, He will take care of you. But you got to trust Him in every area. You're not going to, on our Bible study this past week, I mentioned when I was in medical school, my freshman year, I read the book. Preparation for the Final Crisis. If you haven't read it, you need to read it. Because what it talked about is right before Christ comes, the only ones that's going to be saved are the ones that have a special relationship with Him. And if you're a little flaky, you're not going to be able to go through. And so what we need to do is understand that our health may be an indicator of what's going on in the rest of our lives. Because if we don't trust God with what we eat, how are we going to trust Him in some other area? You know? How are we going to do it? We must trust when we cannot trace. And if we're willing to do that, God is willing to restore. He said, I'll restore the years that the locusts have taken away. All right? And He'll do it because He's God. All right? And so get excited. There was a lady who spoke in our church. We had this all raw program that my wife and this other young lady sponsored. And I was one of the keynote speakers. And this lady from Philadelphia, she said, I developed breast cancer. And and she said, the breast cancer was one of the best things that ever happened to me. I said, this lady, that cancer done gone to the brain. You know, breast goes to the brain, you know. Breast and prostate go to the brain and the bone and the liver, all right, in terms of metastasis. That cancer must go to her brain. But she said, when I got the cancer, I changed my lifestyle. When I changed my lifestyle, the cancer went away. My family watched what I did, and they changed, and their health all improved. Breast cancer was the best thing that ever happened to me. God will allow challenges to come in your life, but He's still God. And if you trust Him, even though you can't trace Him, you know, He'll lead you through the valley, the shadow of death. He'll lead you through the water. He'll lead you through the fire. But the operative word is that you'll go through. My God, He's awesome.